Thank you for joining with me. I have tried videoing this message, and this is my fourth try, so hopefully it goes well. I want to carry on with Nehemiah, and we've been taking a look at Nehemiah and the essential building blocks of vision. And a couple Sundays ago, we left Nehemiah and we saw that he was facing many oppositions and obstacles related to rebuilding the wall. A few Sundays ago, we saw that the different rulers around Israel, when they were rebuilding the wall, had made some threats, comments of the possibility of them evading, coming and destroying what they had done, what they had built. And so Nehemiah didn't change his vision, but he changed how to accomplish that vision. And so we saw people now not only just rebuilding the wall, but having to carry a sword or spear for protection in the other hand. And as I've been thinking about that these past couple of weeks, and again this week, we've had to change how we're going to do church. We've had to change how we're going to worship our Lord together. We've had to change how we were going to work together as a body physically in taking a look at our why. What is our purpose as a church, with sticky notes to sending out the questions to you to answer. And I hope that you've taken the time this week. Each day you would have received one question, and I hope that you've given us your ideas, your thoughts, your comments. We want to hear from you. We want you to be heard. We want to take into consideration what God has been laying upon your heart. And as we've been going through this past couple weeks, and especially this last week, we see that Nehemiah, he proves himself as a confident leader, and he continues to press on with the vision, and we're pressing on as well. We want you to continue to press on with us. And if we take a look at Nehemiah chapter 6, Nehemiah chapter 6, starting at verse 1, we read this. When word came to Sanballat and Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors and the gates. Sanballat and Geshem sent to me this message, Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of No. But they were scheming to harm me. So I sent them messengers back to them with this reply. I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. And then the 5th time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter in which was written this. It is reported among the nations, and Geshem says it is true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king. So come, let us meet together I sent him this reply. Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work, and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. One day I went to the house of Shimei, son of Delai, the son of Metabol, who was shut in his home. He said, let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night, they are coming to kill you. But I said, should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me, so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. Remember also the prophet, and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me, so that the wall was completed in 52 days. Once again, we see from these verses, Nehemiah puts his trust in God. Because it was God who gave him the vision in the first place. And he does the right thing. He's not distracted by the messages or the rumors that Sanballat sends his way. And so that brings us to the 15th building block. Don't get distracted. Life is full of distractions. Important things are often sacrificed for urgent things. Let's just take a brief moment to look at these three distractions that Nehemiah faces in these verses that I just read. Because I also believe that the three primary distractions that we see here are what we face as we endeavor to make what could be and should be a reality at Gospel Light Church. And the first distraction is opportunities. Every day our lives are full of opportunities that come our way, that have good potential to distract us from the main thing that God has called us to do. Often they're good things. However, to accomplish the most important things, we must learn to say no to some good things. In Nehemiah's case, the opportunity of meeting with Sanballat, it turns out that this would not have been a good thing. But even if he had, Nehemiah was not going to sacrifice his time finishing the vision that God gave him to attending this meeting. And he responds, I am doing a great work. I cannot come down. As I think about this, as I think about the last week, the last 2 weeks, the next time we are tempted to do something that would distract us from the vision that God has given us to us, we need to respond as Nehemiah did and keep working towards that vision. The second thing that we see for distraction is criticism. You see, this wasn't the first time that Nehemiah had dealt with criticism, rebuilding the wall. He had run into these same guys earlier on. I mean, Sanballat had criticized his vision and the workers early on. One of the other guys even mentioned that if a fox got onto it, the wall would crumble. However, this time, the criticism was just a little bit different. It was a little bit more personal. It was directed to Nehemiah. And Nehemiah prayed and asked God for strength to continue his work. Nehemiah left it in God's hands to worry about his reputation. And he continued with the vision that God had put before him. As I think about that, I encourage you, do not waste your time focusing on those who may be criticizing you. Pour out your heart to God and then get back to work. The third distraction we see is fear. This prophet tried to convince Nehemiah to run and hide in fear for his life. But just as Nehemiah had not allowed opportunities or criticism to distract him, he also did not let fear distract him from the vision. At some point or another, our vision, when we work our vision, we will run in fear. We will think about all the what ifs, and we will be afraid of failing. But we can't let fear distract us. God always has a deeper purpose for the vision than what a vision on the surface looks like, that what visibly looks like on the surface. For Nehemiah and the people of Israel, the vision was to rebuild the physical walls, but God's ultimate intention was to reestablish Israel as a light to the nation. And that brings us to the 16th building block, and that is, there's divine potential in all you envision to do. Notice the response of Israel's neighbors when the wall was finally completed. And we see that in verses 15 and 16. First of all, in verse 15, we see of chapter 6 that the wall was completed in 52 days. And then in verse 16 it says this: when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God. Notice from this verse who gets the credit. It's not Nehemiah's. It's not the other builders. No, they realized that God was behind this. With God's help, Nehemiah and his crew did in 52 days what many said could not be done at all. And Israel's neighbors were confronted with the power and the presence of Israel's God. While you and I are consumed with the details involved in pursuing God's vision for our life, for our church life, God is up to something that you may not even be aware of. God ultimately wants to draw people to himself. One of the things we see through Scripture, and one of the things we see through living out our vision, that God always reveals himself in the midst of visions he has authored. And when he does, attention shifts from what has been accomplished to whose field the accomplishment. Look back at where we were 7 months ago. Look to where we are. That is because of what God has been doing. God has been fueling that accomplishment. And God has laid upon your hearts the purpose of this church, the why. And he's going to fuel that accomplishment, which brings us to building block 17, and that is the end of a God-ordained vision is God. If you are pursuing a God-given vision in your life, if you and I are pursuing this God-given vision for this church, Gospel Light Church, there will be moments along the way when you will find yourself standing in awe of what he has done on your behalf. And in those moments, your attention would be drawn away from the work at hand to the faithfulness of God. When God shows up, Everybody in the vicinity is affected. When God showed up and this wall was rebuilt in 52 days, Sanballat, Geshem, Tobiah, the people around saw God. The effect may be different for believers versus non-believers, but everyone takes note when God shows up. As God continues to work in and through you as a church body, the community is taking notice and seeing God. Sanballat and his people were not the only ones to recognize that God had intervened on his behalf. The people of Israel also recognized it. And if you was to take the time, and I would encourage you to please do so, if you was to read chapters 8 and 9, you will see that the people returned to the ways that God had instructed them to live. They had gradually gotten away from what God wanted them to do, but they returned once again to obey his commands. And we see people experiencing authentic worship. And although the people didn't realize it, when they were working on the wall, at the end of the vision that God had given them was God himself. The same is true of the visions that God gives to us. The reason for any God-given vision is so that people will experience and know God. The people, they went on in chapters 10 and 11. They went on and they developed a written covenant between themselves and God. And they pledged their devotion to God and his law. And the leaders at the time, they signed that covenant, and the people vowed to uphold it. And that covenant mainly dealt with three areas, and that their relationship with foreigners, their respect for the Sabbath, and their care for the temple. They realized that if they were going to carry out the vision that God had for them, they needed to adhere to some core beliefs and behaviors. Which brings us to the building block number 18. Maintaining a vision requires adherence to a set of core beliefs and behaviors. We all have core beliefs that God has given to us, and we must live according to them, even when it's not easy. We must operate within those boundaries of those beliefs as we move forward in the vision that God has given to us. And so I ask you these questions, think about them. What are Gospel Light Church core beliefs? What is the mission of this church? What is Gospel Light Church purpose? You see, that's what we've been working on as a congregation. That's what we started on the 15th with sticky notes. And this virus has changed things up, but we're pressing on forward and we're moving on. And now you've gotten questions by email. May I encourage you to fill them out. Fill out those ideas. Answer those questions. Send it back to us. Your input is greatly needed so that we can carry on, so that we can go through this as a transitional team and bring back to you with clarity what Gospel Lights Church vision is, what Gospel Lights Church values are, what Gospel Lights Church mission is, and what Gospel Lights Church strategic goals are to achieve that mission. Now, if we were to fast forward, skip ahead over to chapter 13 of Nehemiah, we're going to find that Nehemiah went back to Babylon. He went back to his role as a cupbearer. And we don't know exactly how long he was away before he returns back to Jerusalem. But we find out in chapter 13 that during the time that Nehemiah is away, many things changed. And the people, they reverted back to many of the sins of the previous days. Again, those three areas. The men were marrying foreign women, which was not allowed. The temple was in disarray. They were no longer respecting the Sabbath. And so for Nehemiah, building block 19 came as a rude awakening. And that is, visions require constant attention. Unless we are constantly pursuing the vision, things get off track in a hurry. It is very easy for us to do vision drift. We start drifting away. And if you read chapter 13 in Nehemiah, which I would encourage you to do, we see that Nehemiah, he confronts the problem very clearly. And he gets the people back on track. And he's bold about it. And he says it very strongly to the people. As leaders, as elders, we can be bold. But only if our leadership is vision-based. If our actions are carried out against the backdrop of clearly defined beliefs and behaviors. Which brings us to building block 20. Maintaining a vision requires bold leadership. May I encourage you to continue to lift up your elders, to continue to lift up your transitional team as they go through these sticky notes, as they go through your comments, as they work on this so that we can bring back to you, Lord willing, in May, on one piece of paper, both front and back, what our why is as a church, so that we can grab hold of that, so we can say, just like the people said to Nehemiah after he laid it all out, let's start rebuilding the wall. We'll say, let's do this. So may I encourage you, pray for them. Pray for your future pastor, that the Lord will provide a man and a couple that will carry out, that will engage you, that will empower you, that will strengthen you, that will teach you, that will help you live out this vision. So I leave with you these thoughts. Where are you at today? What has God laid on your heart today? What has He been laying on your heart for the past few Sundays? What is God asking you to do? What is God asking you to do with your spiritual gifts, to do with your abilities, to do with your talents? And the last question I leave with you is, what part are you playing? I would like to close by just praying for you, if I may. Lord, I just thank you. I thank you for each one of my brothers and sisters here. Lord, I pray that you will move through them in a mighty way, that you will strengthen them, that you will encourage them, that they will participate, that they will share their thoughts, their comments, their ideas. Lord, I pray for the transitional team, that you may strengthen them, that you may help them as they boil all these voices down. Lord, may we capture what you have for us as our why, as our purpose. What makes us different at Gospel Light Church? What are we all about? Lord, I just pray too for our elders. May you continue to give them boldness. May you continue to give them strength, wisdom, discernment. Lord, may they help once a vision has been established to keep it together, that it may not be vision drift. That we may not go backwards to the old ways of things like the Israelites did when Nehemiah left. And Lord, I just pray that you may work right now in moving and shaping a couple that you want to be the pastor here at DeBolt. That you will prepare the path. Lord, that you may prepare their hearts and our hearts. Thank you, Lord, for all the great work you've been doing and are continuing to do. And we just pray and ask these things in your name. Amen. Thank you. May you have a great day. God bless.